01. I married Derek, a powerful and feared crime boss, in place of my younger sister. My sister, spoiled since childhood, lost her voice in a car accident. So now, I have to pretend to be mute. On our wedding night, I was nodding off in the hotel suite when I finally heard the door beep open. I looked up and saw a face so handsome it nearly took my breath away. I almost blurted out, "Damn, he's hot," before remembering. Right, I'm supposed to be mute. So I could only stare at him, trying to speak through my eyes. Derek raised an eyebrow. His long fingers tilted up my chin as he studied me closely. "I heard you had an accident a few years ago," he said. "Can't speak anymore, right? I assume that means you can't make any sound at all?" Panic surged through me. Derek was infamous for being ruthless. What if he had some twisted hobby? Before I could spiral further, he chuckled and said, "But as far as I know, people who've lost their voices can still make a little noise." I didn't know much about my sister's condition. We'd only seen each other briefly before the wedding. What he said sounded plausible, so I hummed softly in response. He suddenly smiled, and those dark eyes of his shimmered like stars, filled with something almost tender. He leaned in and kissed me, murmuring, "That's enough." My face burned. Derek had all kinds of rumors swirling around him. He was the illegitimate son of the gang's former leader, cast out at 18 because his mother was lowborn. He only returned 4 years later when the old man fell seriously ill. Both of his previous wives died mysteriously on their wedding night. Then he proposed to my sister. Word was, back when he was down on his luck, my spoiled sister humiliated him at a high-end club, thinking he was just some loser. She rolled down her luxury car window and sneered, "If you're begging on the streets, at least show some respect. Bow to me and I'll give you this money." Arrogant and stupid. Even in plain clothes, Derek's aura screamed privilege. She couldn't stand the fact that he didn't grovel to her. She mocked him shamelessly. But now I'm the one paying the price. How messed up is that? I stared at him blankly. Derek was silent for a moment, then let out a low laugh and covered my eyes with his hand. "Don't look at me like that, sweetheart," he said with a sigh. "You used to be fearless, remember? The cash you gave me that day, every single bill, I still have them, neatly tucked away." So he was out for revenge. My face went pale. Was I going to be the third bride to die on her wedding night? But Derek didn't hurt me. Instead, his touch grew gentler, and he let me drown in a slow, relentless tide of intimacy until dawn crept in through the curtains. I didn't wake up until noon the next day. My body sore, I dragged myself to the vanity and stared at the faint shadows under my eyes. One conclusion: Derek wasn't planning to kill me. At least not yet. Maybe he was like a cat playing with a mouse, torturing me little by little. And sure enough, over the next few days, he proved me right. Derek was like some kind of energy-draining demon. I started waking up later and later each day. He, on the other hand, seemed to grow more energized by the minute. One afternoon, still half asleep, I was woken by him after a meeting. Drowsy, I watched him drop something onto my plate. "Try today's special, zucchini meat rolls," he said. I hated zucchini. I picked up my fork and mumbled, "Aye." But before I could finish saying "don't like zucchini," I snapped back to reality. I wasn't supposed to be able to speak. I was Amy now. So I swallowed the rest of the sentence and forced a sweet smile. Then I gritted my teeth and choked down the massive zucchini meat roll he'd given me. Derek propped his chin on his hand and watched me with amusement. "Wife, were you trying to talk to me just now?" I shook my head, then nodded. He motioned for the maid to bring over a tablet. I typed quickly, "You're always busy with work. It must be exhausting." He glanced at it and smiled faintly. "Not too bad. But what made you suddenly so concerned? As your wife, I should care about your health." I paused for a moment, then typed what I really wanted to say. "For the sake of your health, maybe you could take it easy in bed?" I didn't even get to finish typing before he grabbed my wrist and yanked me into his arms. The curtains fell shut, the light dimmed, and he towered over me with a smirk. "Trying to get me to go easy on you already?" he murmured. "I must not be working hard enough." I glared at him, trying to shame him with my eyes. He just covered my gaze with his hand and whispered, "Don't look at me like that, baby. or I won't be able to stop myself. There was definitely something off about Derek. The next morning, he was gone. So was the assistant who'd come with me. Standing in the room was a woman I didn't recognize. She gave me a polite nod. "Ma'am, I'm Abby. Mr. Derek assigned me as your personal assistant from today onward." I looked at her in surprise. She quickly handed me the tablet. "Is there anything you'd like me to do?" "Where's my assistant?" "She's been reassigned by Mr. Derek. Would you like to freshen up?" "I'll help you get ready." Abby led me to the vanity and opened a jewelry box. "Which piece would you like to wear today?" "I'll help you get dressed." I stared at the sparkling pieces inside, suddenly feeling detached from it all. This audio is originally produced by the YouTube channel, Lovestory. Please credit when sharing. 02. All of this, these clothes, bags, and shoes, were things Amy didn't want. Before the wedding, my stepmother called me into her room. Her expression was indifferent as she said, "Technically, since you're marrying in Amy's place, we should prepare a dowry for you. But because of what your mother did back then, your father still hasn't gotten over it. As your stepmother, I have to think about what's best for you." I said nothing, just lowered my head obediently. She called Amy in and told her to open the walk-in closet and pick out the clothes and bags she didn't like. "Your sister's getting married in your place. As the younger one, you should show some generosity. These items don't suit you anymore, why not let her take them as her dowry?" That wasn't generosity. It was a warning. A warning that I was only allowed to have what Amy didn't want, and that I should never dream beyond my place. I was the illegitimate daughter. My mother had never been favored, so my father disliked me as well. I was already 20 years old and still didn't have an official name. My mother once gave me a name, Betty. Later, when she was caught having an affair, she was thrown out of the house. I barely got to stay behind. From that day on, I was no longer treated as a daughter, but more like a maid tucked away in a secluded family estate. If Derek hadn't suddenly proposed to Amy, and if she hadn't refused to marry into such disgrace, they probably wouldn't have remembered I even existed. I was still lost in thought when Abby opened the closet doors and motioned for me to pick something. Snapping out of it, I stepped inside. The closet was filled with designer clothes, handbags, and shoes so dazzling I could barely take it all in. "Mr. Derek said your family is low-key and that you have refined taste," Abby said gently. "He figured the clothes you brought might not be good enough, so he had all of these prepared for you. If you don't like them, you're welcome to go pick out your own." Low-key. That was a very polite way of putting it. Really, Derek was just calling them stingy. If the real Amy heard Derek criticizing her beloved wardrobe like that, she'd probably faint on the spot. I gave a soft chuckle and casually pulled a Chanel jacket off the rack, handing it to Abby. She tactfully helped me put it on, then went to prepare lunch. She seemed like the most ordinary assistant imaginable. If she hadn't revealed the listening device hidden in her earring when she turned around. I pushed open the villa's front door. Outside stood two bodyguards. One with a bulging waistband that clearly held a gun, and the other gripping a telescopic baton. When they looked at me, their gazes were as cold and sharp as blades. Thinking about Derek's two mysteriously dead wives, I felt a chill down my spine. What if one day, on a whim, he decided to take care of me too? For days, I anxiously waited. No sign of Derek. I finally couldn't hold back and messaged Abby. "I haven't seen Derek lately. Is he caught up with something urgent?" "He'd be thrilled to know you're thinking of him," she replied, though her tone carried a trace of unease. "Actually, Derek's been away on a business trip. It's been 2 days and no one's been able to reach him. I heard something went wrong before he disappeared." Just as the corners of my mouth began to curve into a smile, the villa doors were flung open. A tall figure strode in, drenched in the thick, metallic stench of blood. My smile froze on my face. Derek peeled off his blood-soaked coat and stormed straight up to me, grabbing my wrist. His fingertips were ice cold. His face was pale from blood loss. The light in his eyes was clouded with pain, turning unreadable. I noticed the bandages under his shirt, the bruises on his face, and the dried blood at the corner of his mouth. With a firm tug, he pulled me into his arms and murmured with a half-smile. "So, I hear I was in trouble, and you seemed pretty pleased about it? Was he eavesdropping outside the whole time?" No way, it was just a coincidence. He buried his face in the crook of my neck and let out a soft sigh. Things got messy on this business trip, but all I could think about was you. I rushed back overnight, and this is the welcome I get? My heart skipped. I suspected the acquisition deal had been sabotaged, maybe even involved gang interference. His tone didn't sound hurt at all. In fact, it carried something darker, more dangerous. I looked up and shot Abby a look, motioning for her to bring my phone. She misunderstood completely and immediately piped up. "Oh, Derek, you have no idea, your wife has been worried sick these past few days. She couldn't eat, she barely slept. Now that you're back safe, she finally relaxed. Please don't take her the wrong way." Abby really lived up to her name. Quick-witted and sharp. Who knows how much Derek actually believed? But after a pause, he lifted his face and gave me a faint smile. "Were you really that worried about me, sweetheart?" I swallowed my sarcasm and nodded reluctantly. Suddenly, the storm in his eyes cleared. His gaze lit up like the night sky full of stars. He pulled me even closer. "I'm so touched. You've been amazing." I shook my head, placed his hand on my cheek, and nuzzled into it like a loving wife. Seeing the romantic vibe in the living room, Abby quietly slipped away. I opened my mouth, trying to speak, then pointed toward the phone on the table. But Derek scooped me up and carried me over to the leather sofa in the corner. The scent of blood and tobacco still clung to him, wrapping around me like a storm cloud. A scream lodged in my throat. But I couldn't make a sound. I was supposed to be mute. I pointed at the bruises on his face and the blood at the corner of his mouth, forcing out a couple of tears. He suddenly stopped. "What? Feeling sorry for me now?" Derek reached up and gently wiped away my tears. The lust in his eyes faded, replaced by something soft and lingering. Why was I crying? Was it for the wounded Derek? Or for myself, who still had to smile and play along even when he was hurt? The sky outside slowly darkened. We stayed in that position for nearly half an hour. My neck was sore from looking up at him, but he never kissed me. Self-pity wasn't in my nature. That brief flicker of defeat vanished quickly. I slipped out from under him, grabbed the tablet, and typed. "I'm really worried about your injuries. Should we call a private doctor? At least let them patch you up." Cool wind drifted through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A dim lamp swayed in the darkness. Derek sat up and leaned on his elbow, smiling without warmth. "This acquisition trip was top secret. No one can know. That includes doctors." I seriously doubted that. A man like Derek, who owned a massive corporation and held so much power. And he didn't trust a single doctor? "So," he said, lips curling slightly, "I'll have to trouble my wife to take care of me herself." Trouble? No. This was fate being cruel. 03. I grabbed the first aid kit. When I turned around, Derek had already unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the dark bruises on his shoulder. The injury looked serious. My brows twitched, it felt like my own shoulder ached just looking at it. But as my eyes drifted downward, I had to admit, he had a killer body. His skin was a bit pale from blood loss, but the muscles were lean and sharply defined. I stared a few seconds too long. He noticed. "Wife, you like what you see," he teased. "Once I'm healed up, how about we turn on a light in the bedroom and you can admire me all night long?" The ointment warmed between my fingers before I gently spread it over his wound. He let out a muffled grunt. The same man known for being bulletproof on the streets suddenly looked fragile. The longer I applied the medicine, the more he groaned. In the end, he even started acting coy. "Babe, I feel like crap. Can I just lean on you for a while?" Sweat gathered on my forehead, not sure if it was from the heat or just sheer tension. Something felt off. I looked down and noticed Derek's face was flushed in an unnatural way. I reached out and touched his forehead, it was burning hot. I hesitated between letting the fever run its course and going out to get help. But in the end, I gave in. I propped him up against the inner edge of the sofa, then went out to find Abby. Because if Derek really lost his mind while alone with me, I doubted those bodyguards would let me walk out of this place alive. Just as Derek began to recover, I got a call from home. They said my stepmother was seriously ill, that she missed her daughter and wanted to see me. seriously ill? Fantastic news. I nearly couldn't hide the smile creeping onto my face. But then I turned and met Derek's gaze. You must be really worried, huh? He said. Then go visit her. I forced a concerned look. Too bad I have an important meeting, he added. Can't go with you. He came closer, straightened my collar, gently brushed my cheek, and kissed me. Come back soon, okay? I'll miss you. But when I got back home, I found out my stepmother wasn't sick at all. In fact, she looked completely healthy, even relaxed as she asked. So, how has Derek been treating you since the wedding? I was pretty sure they didn't want the real answer. So I took a breath, squeezed out some fake tears, and said, after what Amy did to him, he tortures me every day. I can barely eat. I'm covered in bruises. Amy looked at me with a mix of satisfaction and doubt. Her assistant, Ellie, chimed in with perfect timing. But second miss, you actually look like you put on some weight. I froze. Maybe it's just water retention from not eating properly. After some small talk, I finally lost my patience. Mom, weren't you supposed to be sick? You look pretty energetic to me. The mother-daughter duo exchanged a glance. Ellie quietly left the room and closed the door behind her. With just the three of us left, Amy pulled a delicate little bottle from her purse and pushed it toward me. My heart skipped. What is this? Derek is cunning and cruel, my stepmother said with a sigh. Seeing him abuse you like this, as your stepmother, I just can't stand by and watch. Find a chance to slip this into his food. Once it's done, someone will come for you. You'll never have to worry about anything again. Someone? I gave a slight smirk, masking my sarcasm. Let me guess. Amy's getting married? Exactly, my stepmother said, face lighting up. The heir of the Brooks Group has taken a liking to her. He came to talk business and mentioned marriage too. But now she's not your sister anymore, we're introducing her as a cousin from overseas. She's Daisy now. I blinked, momentarily speechless. Seeing my silence, my stepmother assumed I wasn't on board. Her face instantly darkened. If you dare ruin Daisy's future, I'll make sure your mother's jade pendant disappears forever. I looked up at her. Are you threatening me? She stood and glared down at me. Betty, you're nothing but an unwanted bastard. If this works out, I'll even give your mother some dignity back. But if it doesn't? Do you really think Derek won't find out you're impersonating his fiancée? And when he does, do you think you'll live to see tomorrow? With that, she walked out and left me alone with Amy. Amy stayed seated, looking elegant and soft-spoken. A face that resembled mine by about 70%. She took out her phone, typed a quick message, and showed it to me. Sister, this is your fate. Even if you take my place, you'll never truly be me. When I left the house, I took the little bottle with me. Sitting in the back of the luxury car on the way back, I gripped it tightly, my thoughts a tangled mess. Derek might be untouchable in the business world, but that kind of power attracts enemies. And Brooks, the man about to marry Daisy, was one of them. His uncle, Hunter, was known as the Godfather. And his nephew, the real head of the Brooks Group, was a rising legend on Wall Street. Now he was back in the country, clearly ready to make moves. So who really came up with this idea to poison Derek? Was it the Brooks Group, or someone else? I didn't dare think further. By the time I got back, night had fallen. To my surprise, Derek was still up, waiting to have dinner with me. He must have noticed my mind was elsewhere. He reached out, gently held my hand. What's wrong, babe? Was your mom's illness really that serious? I shook my head and sighed. If only. If she really was dying, I'd pop champagne. Derek asked Abby to bring over the tablet. I hesitated, then typed. After I left, my stepmother brought back a cousin who had been studying abroad. She's raising her carefully and named her Daisy. I'm just. I didn't know how to continue. Derek suddenly reached out and gently brushed the messy hair off my forehead. His voice was so soft, like he was coaxing a frightened little animal. Do you have a nickname, sweetheart? I shook my head. How about I give you one? He typed something into his phone's notes app and said with a smile. You smile in a way that makes my heart flutter. Let's go with Betty, okay? My head snapped up. I stared at him, stunned. For a moment, Derek's face, so close to mine, overlapped strangely with the warm, gentle smile I remembered from my mother. 04. I was still little then. My mother would cradle me while reciting poetry, gently stroking the top of my head as she whispered. Betty, you see? That's your nickname. Betty means something beautiful. But I hope you won't grow up too obedient. Being too soft isn't always a good thing. Her words still echoed in my ears. But in the blink of an eye, her cold, lifeless body was laid out in front of me. My father stormed in with a belt in hand, eyes blazing. It was my stepmother who stopped him, saying, "No matter what, Betty is still our family's daughter." "She's not," he snapped. "After what her mother did, who knows if she's even my child?" He shot me a look of utter disgust. "From now on, she can live here as a maid. In this house, I only have one daughter, Amy." "Betty." Derek's voice called me softly, full of a sigh. I snapped out of the memory and quickly wiped my tears, flustered. He reached out and pulled me into his arms, gently stroking my hair. "You're my wife now. Your parents will change their tune eventually. And since you're my wife, whatever you wish for, just tell me." What did I wish for? I wished my mother were still alive. I wished they were all dead. But none of that could be said out loud. Terrified they'd find the bottle Daisy had given me, I kept it hidden carefully, pressed close to my skin. But I never got the chance to use it, because Derek was the one who got poisoned first. That night, he came home from a meeting and we had dinner together. Halfway through a bowl of shrimp congee, Derek suddenly turned pale and twisted to the side, coughing up a mouthful of blood. A cold shock shot up from the soles of my feet. I sprang to my feet, heart plunging into a bottomless abyss. Derek gripped the table, slowly raising his eyes to look at me. Under the dim light, his suit jacket hung loosely from his shoulders, making his face look even more colorless. But that vivid red stain at the corner of his lips, it was blinding. "Babe," he rasped weakly. "Come help me. I can't stand up." I forced myself to ignore the sting of pain his words triggered, grabbed his arm, opened my mouth to say something. But not a single sound came out. Thankfully, Abby came in at that moment to clear the dishes and spotted what was happening. Derek had been poisoned. The toxin was aggressive, but luckily he hadn't ingested too much. It wasn't fatal. Then Ford, Derek's personal bodyguard, led a search. And found the bottle in my makeup bag. He uncapped it. Inside was poison. Real poison. Ford stared at me, eyes full of murderous intent. His hand hovered near his gun. "Derek has always treated you well. Why would you do something like this to him?" Right then, I hated this whole mute act more than ever. I couldn't even defend myself. Seeing I wasn't speaking, Ford waved his hand. "Take her. Lock her up. We'll deal with her once Derek's stable." The guards behind him stepped forward, about to drag me away. When a hoarse voice rang out behind them. "No need." Derek had woken up. Still pale, but his eyes, those starry eyes, were locked on mine, unwavering. "Betty, come here." Under everyone's gaze, I walked over and sat beside him. I typed a message on my phone and showed it to him. It wasn't me. Derek coughed softly, his voice faint but still holding a smile. "Of course I believe you." "But, Derek," Ford cut in, holding up the bottle, agitated. "We found this in her bag." "It couldn't be Betty," Derek said calmly. "Her heart and eyes are full of me. Why would she poison me? That bottle was planted. Look into it." Ford glared at me but finally responded, "Yes, sir." Once the room emptied and the door closed, I stared at Derek's pale face under the soft light. He was already looking at me. "Betty," he said gently, "I don't have the strength to hold you right now. But don't be afraid. I've never doubted you." I stared back in silence, not moving, not blinking, until he finally closed his eyes in exhaustion. Maybe it was the medicine. Maybe it was the lingering effects of the poison. And no, I wasn't ungrateful. When Ford tried to haul me off, and Derek stopped him without hesitation, saying he believed in me. His eyes were so sincere, so tender. For a moment, I almost believed he truly loved me. But how could it be such a coincidence? Derek was ruthless, cunning, and unbelievably cautious. How could he fall for such an obvious poisoning attempt? Unless. I sat at his bedside, tormented by doubt, the entire night. When he finally woke the next morning, he looked at me, like he knew I had something to say. "You want to tell me something?" he asked quietly. I nodded, picked up my phone, and typed out a message. "You trusted me at such a critical moment." I was really touched. "I'll never forget that." Derek smiled. "Save it for when I'm fully recovered." His eyes narrowed with amusement, the mole on his face looking even more charming. "Babe, we've got all the time in the world to settle this score." He wasn't joking. Once he recovered, he really made me pay him back. Thoroughly. Afterward, someone came again, saying my stepmother missed me and wanted to see me. Derek turned them down flat. "She's not feeling well," he said. "She needs rest." But I knew exactly why they were there. They wanted to check on the poisoning progress. Too bad the poison bottle had been confiscated by Ford. There was nothing left to use. One afternoon, while Derek was out on business, I wandered aimlessly through the villa and somehow ended up in the kitchen. The air was filled with the sweet scent of osmanthus. I had barely taken in a breath when a lively little pastry chef appeared with a tray. "Freshly baked osmanthus honey cake, ma'am. Please try it." Seeing that I liked it, she brought over the whole tray. She even carried it herself with oven mitts, following behind me like a shadow. "It's hot. Let me bring it to your room, ma'am." But just as we reached the stairs, Abby rushed over in a panic. "Ma'am, where have you been?" I froze, staring at her. She seemed to realize she'd overreacted and quickly softened her tone. "Of course you can go wherever you like in the house. I just wanted to say, please don't go near the study. There are bodyguards stationed there, and they don't ask questions. I'm afraid you might get hurt." "The study?" I raised an eyebrow, then turned around and typed a message on my phone for her to see. I was just hungry. "Went to the kitchen for a snack." "No need to panic. I'm only concerned for your safety." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to the little pastry chef and typed another question. "What's your name?" "Ella, ma'am." "My name is Ella." Abby handed her a shopping card. "All right, go back to your duties. This is a reward from the lady of the house." From that day on, I started visiting the kitchen to see Ella more and more often. 05. Ella was an incredible cook. She made all kinds of delicate desserts, and would even stew melt-in-your-mouth braised pork just for me. She had a lovely personality too. Once we got to know each other, she'd chat with me nonstop, cheerful and sweet. I guess I was spending so much time in the kitchen that even Derek found out. One night, when the wind had quieted and the rain had passed, he gently wiped the sweat off my forehead and suddenly said, "I heard my wife's been getting pretty close with one of the kitchen girls." "So? Did she win your heart?" I forced my sore arms to move and typed on my phone. "Don't tell me you're jealous of the kitchen girl now?" He glanced at the screen, then buried his face in my shoulder and laughed softly. "Since you know how jealous I am, shouldn't you be a little more careful?" That was just a joke. And yet he admitted it so easily? Moments later, Derek's smile faded. He reached out, his fingertips gently brushing over my eyes. "Babe, I've got a small heart. These days, it only has room for one person, you. But if you keep looking at someone else, I might get hurt." His voice still carried the laziness of post-passion bliss, but by the end, there was a sharp edge to his tone. If I hadn't reminded myself who I was impersonating, I might have actually believed the possessiveness in his voice was real. Sigh. I sighed inwardly. If you really hate Daisy that much, why not just send someone to get rid of her with a clean shot? Why make me suffer instead? At dawn, Derek finally showed mercy and let me go. The next few days, I was too exhausted to visit Ella again. Until one evening. I suddenly craved some crab soup dumplings. Without thinking, I set my tablet down and went straight to the kitchen to find Ella. But as I passed Derek's study, I heard a sharp, familiar cry from inside. I froze, then turned toward the sound, only to be stopped by two armed guards at the door. They stood stone-faced. "The boss is in a meeting. Please step back, ma'am, it could be dangerous." I ignored them, lifted my dress, and walked past. Right into Abby. She stammered, "Ma'am." But couldn't say anything more. Because just a few steps ahead, under the dim lighting, I saw Ella kneeling on the floor, shaking all over. There were red marks on her face, obvious slap marks. And standing before her, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit with an icy expression, was Derek. "You should have learned the rules the moment you stepped into this house," he said, like it was just idle conversation. "No one enters my study. Ever. And that safe? You're not even allowed to look at it." He smiled faintly. "But since you're young, I'll go easy on you." "You're fired." "Got anything to say?" Ella sobbed, barely able to breathe, just shaking her head again and again. I guess the commotion at the door caught his attention, because Derek turned and looked straight at me. He stood in the shadows, and the last bit of sunset outside disappeared into the dark behind him. The eyes that had been warm and tender last night were now calm as a frozen lake. But just beneath that icy surface, something impossible to grasp shimmered faintly. "Betty." He said my name. "Come here. Stand by me." I was wearing a brand new custom gown, the hem trailing on the floor, embroidered with crimson blossoms. As I walked toward Derek, the dress brushed against bloodstains on the floor, and red began creeping up the fabric. Derek pretended not to notice. He took my hand and said gently, "She broke the rules. I dealt with her." "Did that scare you?" I almost shook my head, then remembered my current identity and gave a small nod instead. "There'll be a new girl in the kitchen soon. If you have preferences, you can pick her yourself." His fingers were warm, stained with blood as they brushed my ear. "Don't be afraid, Betty. I'd never treat you the way I treated her." But to my ears, it sounded exactly the same. "Don't worry, I'll treat you exactly like her." That moment snapped me out of the delusion I'd let myself fall into. I remembered who Derek really was. In the business world, he was infamous, cold-blooded, ruthless. Human lives meant nothing to him but stepping stones. And to him, I wasn't just anyone, I was Daisy. The girl who once publicly humiliated him. All the fine clothes and gourmet meals might have lulled me for a while. But I couldn't let myself drown in that illusion. That night, I clung to him more desperately than ever, showering him with affection. So much so that Derek finally raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why so enthusiastic tonight, babe?" I shook my head, gazing at him with fake tenderness, all while making a plan in my mind. If he guarded that safe so carefully, it must hold something critical. His weakness. So a few nights later, while he was away on a business trip, I slipped past Abby and the guards and snuck into his study. It was my first time there. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood, cold and clean. Mont Blanc pens on the desk, moonlight filtering in through the windows. Everything was quiet, composed, intimidating. I scanned the room, walking toward the safe. But got distracted by the massive wall of books. "Betty." That familiar voice came from behind me. Light, amused, and dangerously close. "My sweet Betty," he said. "Midnight cravings for some steamy romance novels?" I froze. The hesitation lasted only a second. Then I pulled the knife from my waist and lunged at his eyes. But every move I made, he countered with ease. Like he'd known my amateur tricks all along. He caught my wrist and held it tightly. I cried out in pain and dropped the knife. Under the pale moonlight, he pinned me against the windowsill, his eyes scanning my face like a blade. "Betty," he whispered. "You used to cry for me. But now, you really want me dead, don't you?" He sounded like he was actually hurt. In that moment, I couldn't keep up the mute act anymore. Gritting my teeth, I said, "Derek, let me go." "Ah, so Betty's done pretending?" He chuckled lazily, still toying with me, leaning in bit by bit. "You talk too much. It must have been torture for you to stay quiet all this time, huh?" So, he knew. He'd known all along. He'd been playing with me. And I was ashamed that some part of me actually felt disappointed. His lips hovered just above mine, close enough to drag me back into all those wild, tangled nights. Not even an hour ago, we were still tangled together in sweaty silence. Derek's fingers traced my eyelids. His voice, low and teasing, whispered, "You played the part well. Didn't like the clothes or jewelry I gave you?" Why not turn the act into something real? I looked up and said. False luxury might fool me for a while, but not when the knife's already at my throat. You killed Ella, didn't you? To send me a message? I took a deep breath. And now I'd broken into your study, touched your precious safe. So what's your punishment? Make it quick. Cold air rushed in through the window, sweeping away the warmth of his fingertips. That chill settled on my neck, like a wire tightening, ready to snap. I clenched my fists and stared at him, daring him to strike. But what I heard next was his voice, soft as silk. How could I bear to? Betty, you said you owed me. We haven't even started yet. Then he smiled in the dark. Why not start right here? The paper scattered to the floor. And so did the red gown embroidered with white roses. 06. It wasn't until dawn that he finally let me go. Perhaps the night wind had been too chilly. By the time the first light of morning crept in, Derek carried me back to the bedroom, and soon after, I came down with a high fever. In my dazed state, fragmented memories resurfaced. My life at home had never been easy. Back when my mother was alive, she protected me. But after she passed, with my stepmother's silent approval, even the maids felt entitled to boss me around. Even though I was a year younger than Daisy, we happened to share the same birthday. On her birthday, her room would overflow with designer handbags and luxury jewelry. Meanwhile, I'd hide in the kitchen trying to cook a small bowl of noodles for myself. Only to have it snatched away by a maid, who'd then stand over me, arms crossed and smirking. How dare you take food from the kitchen without permission from the master, madam, or Miss Daisy? I knew Daisy hated me. Honestly, I always felt like losing one's voice was the kind of misfortune that should have happened to me. But for something so imperfect to appear in her perfect life. Well, it was the only time I believed fate had a sense of justice. Heh. If you asked me, that was the only time the heavens ever opened their eyes. Once, the housekeeper had punished me by skipping my dinner. That night, starving to the point my stomach ached, I sat on the balcony hugging my knees and watching the moon, thinking about my mom. My dad rarely came home. Whenever he did, it was to attend some social event, always bringing my mother along to play the part of the elegant, understanding wife. To outsiders, he was a successful businessman with a loving family. But only I knew they had been separated for years, just keeping up appearances. Before she met my father, my mom had been a well-known artist. She was gentle, but she had a mind of her own. I took after her in many ways, stubborn, rebellious. I refused to study art, and I refused to bow to anyone. I even saved up 2 years' worth of allowance to secretly take taekwondo classes, hoping that one day, I could protect both of us. Whenever I practiced, my mom would just smile at me and say, Betty's going to be a warrior woman someday. But I let her down. I never became a hero. Whatever little defiance I had was trapped beneath layers of elite family rules. I couldn't even fight back when I was forced to take Daisy's place and marry Derek. Once again becoming a canary in a gilded cage. It seems like generation after generation of women born in chains share the same fate. After my mother's death, Daisy once came to see me. Back then, she could still talk. Her voice was sweet as syrup, but the words were venom-tipped. She leaned close to me, smiling like a poisonous flower. If your mother had known how to seize opportunity, you might have been the real daughter of this house, she whispered. But she chose to be all high and mighty. Look where that got you. Do you hate her for it? My eyes snapped open. Outside, rain was pattering softly against the window. Abby's delighted voice rang out, Ma'am. You're awake. You've been in a feverish coma for a full day. I opened my mouth. Where's Derek? Abby froze, eyes wide in shock. Ma'am, you can talk? I was just as stunned. Wait. Derek hadn't told them I wasn't really Daisy? While I was still dazed, Abby clapped her hands and beamed. The boss will be so happy when he hears. But. Ma'am, how did it happen? Seeing the confusion on her face, I gave a dry laugh. Must be one of those medical miracles. Even after I finished lunch and took my medicine, Derek still didn't show. Abby finally said. There was a sudden crisis at the company last night. The boss had to rush out. He didn't come home. Before he left, he gave us one strict instruction. If anyone from your family shows up, we're not to let them see you. No exceptions. Just a few simple words, but I could already feel the storm brewing behind them. Derek might be powerful now, but he'd built his empire from the ground up. His background was murky. Some say he was the illegitimate child of a powerful figure, others say he used to be a street thug. No matter what, the old money families had never accepted him. Even his own family looked down on him. But now, his reach had grown. He was touching the interests of people in high places. And thinking about how they used their political connections to pressure me into poisoning him. It was clear some of them were running out of patience. The danger Derek faced on this trip was probably worse than I imagined. And that night, the light that stayed on in his study till dawn, the teasing affection he'd shown me lately. All of it blurred together into a fog I couldn't clear. Maybe if I pushed through the haze, I'd see something real. But I didn't want to, not yet. As I was lost in thought, a familiar voice sounded from the doorway. Betty. My head snapped up. Derek stood there in a black suit, tie loosened, leaning casually against the doorframe. His face was pale, but his smile rippled across his features like wind over a still lake. Abby, sensing the moment, slipped quietly out and closed the door. Now it was just the two of us. There was still a faint scent of blood on him. He must have just come from some brush with death. After a beat of silence, he started walking toward me. Each step like a drumbeat echoing in my chest. I couldn't help but wonder. Was he about to say something cold and final, like that night in the study? Or would it be one of his playful, cryptic teases, the kind that blurred truth and fiction? But he said neither. He stopped in front of me, raised his hand, and gently brushed my cheek. If I hadn't come back this time. Betty, would you have remembered me, even once in a while? My mind told me, he was just trying to make me feel guilty. But after all these months of playing pretend, of faking feelings, I couldn't deny there had been moments where something real flickered. After a pause, I replied flatly. I married you. If something happened to you, I'd definitely mourn for at least 3 years. Laughter lit up Derek's eyes. He turned his head and coughed lightly, then was about to speak when I cut in. Now that you know I'm not Amy, not the real heiress, this marriage can end here. Let's sign the divorce papers. I'll move out of your mansion, and the real Amy can move in. The smile vanished from his face. He sighed. Why would you think she's the one I wanted to marry? Wasn't it because she humiliated you in public all those years ago? You clawed your way to the top just to get revenge, didn't you? Derek's eyes narrowed, a slow, cold smile tugging at the corners of his lips. You think someone like her is worth me sacrificing my marriage for? Oh? So now marriage is sacred? Including me, this would be your third one. I stayed silent, but he seemed to read my thoughts. He let out a quiet sigh. The 2 women before you, those so-called honeymoon accidents. They came to kill me. Tell me, Betty. If I hadn't dealt with them first, what else could I have done? I scoffed. You could have just done what you did with me. Assign a loyal watchdog like Abby to monitor their every move. He tilted his head and smiled, but the coldness in his eyes made my skin crawl. You think Abby was assigned to watch you? Then Derek laughed. But the laughter didn't reach his eyes. It was sharp, cold, and just a little bit dangerous. 07. He pulled me into his arms, and with that movement, the scent of blood around him thickened. That impossibly handsome face came so close it pressed against my cheek. His breath trembled slightly as he spoke, and I could feel every vibration. So, my wife would rather keep their planted spy close than let Abby stay by her side? The gesture was far too intimate. Where our skin touched, the heat spread instantly, making even my heart tremble. He drew in a soft breath, then said each word slowly and deliberately. I wanted to marry you, Betty. From the very beginning, the one I wanted was you. The closeness amplified everything. My senses overloaded. I instinctively tried to pull away, but he reached out, pinched my chin, refusing to let me escape. Why? Derek didn't answer. I felt a sudden weight slump onto my shoulder. Something was wrong. I grabbed his face and turned it toward me. His eyes were shut tight. He had passed out. The moment I touched his shoulder, my hand came away wet. Looking down, I saw it was soaked in blood. I tore open his shirt. There it was. A brutal gunshot wound, raw and messy. The bullet had already been removed. A sharp breath caught in my throat. What the hell had happened last night? While I was burning up with fever and he was out handling the company crisis? When death is that close, love or betrayal no longer matters. I gritted my teeth and, with great effort, managed to lift Derek and lay him on the bed. Then I ran outside and called for Abby. The boss passed out, his wounds bad. Call a doctor. Now. Abby answered with a shocked, yes, ma'am, and ran a few steps. Then abruptly stopped and turned back. I was trained in combat from a young age. Originally, I was one of the boss's bodyguards, she said. When you married in, he assigned me to protect you, not to spy on you. I looked at her, not saying a word. She continued, the company may look solid on the outside, but at the top, Derek's become everyone's target. Business rivals want to destroy him. Politicians fear him. But his feelings for you, they're real. Abby gave a respectful bow and left quickly. I returned to the bedside, gazing down at the unconscious Derek. With his eyes closed, his usual sharpness was absent. The soft glow from the floor lamp fell over his pale face, casting a quiet, almost tender warmth. For some reason, I suddenly thought of that night, half a month ago. He had just returned from a business trip. I was eating dinner in the dining room when he scooped me up without warning, sat down with me in his lap, and kissed me. That kiss was wild, intense, like he wanted to consume me whole. Yet at the same time, a large hand cradled the back of my head, careful, protective. I clutched his shirt, my hands and heart trembling together. Much later, I heard him sigh against my skin. That trip was too dangerous. I only made it back because of you. I said coldly, what's it got to do with me? The day before I left, I wanted to kiss you goodbye. But you were sleeping so soundly, I couldn't bring myself to wake you. When I almost died, the only thing I could think was, damn, I still owe her a kiss. It was already dark when he said that, his eyes reflecting the warm light like a vortex. And I, shamefully, got lost in it. How could I not be moved? Even in the upper-class world I'd been forced into, I'd heard the rumors. Derek's hands were stained with blood. Countless people hated him enough to want him dead. And even more wanted to drag him down just to take his place. I pursed my lips, reaching out to brush the messy hair away from his forehead. But just then, I saw his lashes twitch. He opened his eyes slightly, still unfocused, trapped in a dream. He looked at me in a daze and whispered with a hoarse voice. Shimmy. Asterisk junior sister asterisk. My entire body went cold. Derek's injury this time was severe. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, and he'd driven himself home while drunk. The doctor said the bumpy ride had torn the wound open even more. For 3 days, Derek drifted in and out of consciousness. I stayed at his side the entire time. The doctor, moved by my persistence, said, Madam, your devotion to the chairman is truly admirable. I let out a cold laugh. Just trying not to look like I tried to murder him. Seeing the expression on my face, the doctor wisely shut his mouth. I've read enough of those rich family romance novels to know exactly what a stand-in is. Thinking back to all of Derek's tenderness. And then remembering how, in the haze of fever, he'd whispered shimmy. I suddenly felt like all my fluttering emotions had been laughably misplaced. On the 4th day, Derek finally woke up, his fever broken. The long illness had drained him. His face was gaunt, pale, and striking in a way that made him seem fragile. He opened his eyes and smiled the moment he saw me. Thanks for staying with me, Betty. I replied in a mocking tone. No need to thank me. It's just standard protocol for a stand-in. He looked at me, confused and hurt. And I couldn't breathe from the pressure in my chest. I turned away abruptly. I'll go check if the IV's ready. For the next few days, I spoke to Derek coldly and without warmth. But every time he looked at me, his gaze remained soft, deep, full of patience. Like he really loved me. Eventually, I snapped. I slammed the nutrient bottle down on the nightstand and said, If you're so hopelessly in love with your junior sister, you should have married her. Not me. Don't fake some infatuation with me while secretly mourning her every damn day. Derek stared at me, stunned. I exhaled slowly. You didn't expect me to figure it out, did you? The night you were unconscious, you called out for her. Don't bother pretending anymore, I know where your heart is. He had been reclining lazily, still recovering. But when he heard that, he turned his head and covered his mouth with a quiet laugh. The movement pulled at his healing shoulder. He winced, paling, but his eyes glittered with a stunning, almost blinding intensity. When he finished laughing, he looked serious for the first time. You're right. I do have a junior sister. Ah, I thought. So the act finally drops. She comes from a prestigious family, but she's an illegitimate child. Her father didn't love her, her stepmother bullied her, and her half-sister tormented her constantly. Oh wow. Even the backstory matches mine? So Derek really put in the work to find his perfect stand-in. We trained under the same master, but she never actually met me. When I was running with a gang, I had a mentor. He taught me how to kill, how the underground works. But he was kind of a bum. One spring, he disappeared for 2 weeks. When he came back, he bragged nonstop about being rescued by a young girl while fleeing his enemies. He was so grateful, he taught her the basics of killing. So technically, she's my junior sister. As he spoke, his eyes never left mine. They were full of something deep, something stirring. Like ripples on the surface of a quiet lake, breaking suddenly into waves. You're listening to Love Short Story, a YouTube channel dedicated to captivating short stories. Let's continue. 08. By the time Derek finished speaking, I couldn't hide the look of shock on my face. Later, my mentor offered to help her get revenge, Derek continued, but she refused. Said revenge was her burden alone, and even if she burned down that family's mansion, she alone would bear the consequences. I was intrigued, so I snuck over to see for myself. That's when I realized, her half-sister, the one tormenting her, was Amy. The same Amy who once humiliated me in public. She was too loud, so I had someone ruin her vocal cords. Then I stayed hidden, and kept watching over my shimmy. I had once traveled to Northern Europe, right between winter and spring. The wind was biting, wild, but fresh grass was starting to break through the frozen ground. Life budding in the dead of cold. Her eyes reminded me of that spring wilderness in the north. I fell in love with her at first sight. I had, in fact, saved someone during those years I lived alone. A silver-haired man had collapsed in front of my apartment, drenched in blood. I hesitated, but in the end, I dragged him inside. With a sterilized knife, I cut away the necrotic flesh around his wound, applied hemostatic ointment, and bandaged him up. When he recovered, he thanked me by teaching me how to identify people in the underworld, gifted me a diamond-studded pistol, and taught me a few lethal techniques. The same moves I'd used that night when I tried to kill Derek in his study. No wonder he'd countered me so easily. He'd learned them first, and better. No wonder Amy, the spoiled heiress, suddenly fell ill and lost her voice. It wasn't divine retribution. It had always been man-made. Derek looked at me with a glimmer of amusement and said with a chuckle. So my wife was jealous, of herself? The tips of my ears burned. I stiffened and said defensively. So you fell for me from the start. You were certain I'd end up taking Amy's place and marrying you? Weren't you afraid Amy would covet your status and marry you anyway, despite the risk of revenge, just for the wealth and power? Derek curled his lips in a smirk. What Amy thinks is none of my business. But from where I'm standing, you clearly do covet my good looks. Me? But, he said slowly, narrowing his eyes with a wicked smile, if it had been Amy who married me. The rumors in the business world would have needed an update. Rumors? I asked. Of course, he said lazily, sipping imaginary wine. CEO Derek, 3 wives in, all mysteriously vanished on their wedding nights. Clearly born under a cursed star. He said it so casually, like making Amy vanish would be as easy as pouring a glass of water. But I fell quiet. For much of my life, Amy had been a shadow looming over me. I once asked my mother, naively. Why doesn't Dad ever come see me? Every time, she'd hug me tightly, her voice soft with apology. But really, it wasn't her who owed me an apology. I longed for my father's love, but I knew. As an illegitimate child, that was a luxury I couldn't afford. One year, on my birthday, my mother finally summoned her courage. She went to his office, hoping he'd come spend just a moment with me, even if just a coffee break. But it happened to be a bad day at work for him. And when she made that request, it was like she'd handed him the perfect outlet for his frustration. He slapped her across the face, knocking her to the ground. With disgust in his voice, he shouted, "A bastard like her, how dare you use a birthday as an excuse to beg for affection?" He stormed off back into the building. Amy, standing beside my stepmother, clung to her arm with a smirk. "Why does Auntie look so pathetic?" she said sweetly. "Just like someone from the countryside, no class at all. And now you're using your daughter to get attention?" My stepmother put on a fake scolding voice. "Amy, that's enough. Don't say such things. She's still your elder." Amy snorted. "She's just a mistress." "What kind of elder is that?" Then she walked up to me, stared down with arrogant disdain, and said, "Someone like you will never be fit to be my sister." With that, she turned and left. The click of her heels echoed against the marble like gunshots. My mother left in tears. The next day, she used her savings to buy me a beautiful bracelet. Told me it was a birthday gift from my dad. And I believed it. It wasn't until months later, when I overheard the neighbors talking, that I learned the truth. From that day on, I stopped hoping for my father's love. And I never again asked my mother to invite him over. I clutched a Swiss Army knife tightly in my hand. Back then, I swore I'd climb out of that pit with my own strength. To give my mother the life she deserved. But I never got the chance. Lost in memory, I was startled by a cool hand covering mine. I looked up. Derek was holding my hand, his voice gentle. "After you married me, I tricked you. I joked around. That was my fault. How about this, I'll make Fiona disappear. Consider it my apology. Sound fair?" I was silent for a moment. Then murmured, "I do like you. But I don't want to use you." "We're husband and wife," he said softly, his arm slipping around my waist. "There's no such thing as using me, helping you is just what I do." He looked right into my eyes, his face aglow in the soft light from the floor lamp. The sharp lines of his jaw were softened by a few messy strands of hair. Maybe it was because he was still weak from the injury, but he wasn't holding me tightly. Yet somehow, my fingers turned weak, and my heart raced wildly in my chest. He wasn't wrong. I really, truly, couldn't get enough of how he looked. Swallowing nervously, I was just about to lean in and kiss him when he said, "Besides, who knows? One day, I might need you to save me." The rest of his words disappeared between my lips. Derek clearly liked my sudden boldness. He smiled with his eyes, relaxing into the kiss, letting me take the lead. Only. Back then, I thought he was just saying it to make me feel better. I never expected that moment to come so soon. Half a month later, Derek had fully recovered. And I finally learned what really happened that night at the private club. He'd received an invitation from Brooks, his business rival and a mafia boss. Thinking it was a promising new deal, Derek accepted. But when he arrived, it was an ambush in disguise. Brooks had invited several local kingpins, figures from both the criminal world and the political elite, to join them. 3 rounds of drinks later, Brooks leaned back, smiling lazily, and said, "I've heard Derek has a mysterious safe in his study. Anyone who touches it mysteriously disappears. We've always been curious. What exactly is inside that thing?" Derek sipped his wine calmly, resting his chin on his hand as he smiled lazily. "Just some worthless trinkets, Mr. Brooks. No need for you to worry." One of the local bosses chimed in. "Rumor has it your company's sudden rise came with a mysterious influx of cash. Wouldn't happen to be proof of that, sitting in that very safe, would it?" 09. The word source of funds held deep meaning for men of both the underworld and the legitimate business world. Brooks' smile grew colder. "Derek may not be a direct member of our syndicate, but ever since he took over, he's done more for the organization than anyone. Without him, we'd have been wiped out by law enforcement a long time ago." Everyone at the table could hear the hidden displeasure and implied threat in his words. "I'll vouch for Jiang," said the leader of the Yuanjiang syndicate as he stood up. He nodded slightly at Derek, then turned to the big boss. "He's loyal to the gang and the entire underground network." The big boss's face grew darker, and the small smile vanished from his lips. Just then, the second in command of the syndicate stood and said to the boss, I recently heard of a big boss in the neighboring province who voluntarily gave up all his territories and weapons to prove his loyalty. Their back and forth, seemingly casual, ended in silence as both turned their gazes to Derek. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating stillness. Derek held his wine glass, his expression unreadable but slightly amused. So, Brooks, are you implying I should do the same? Brooks smiled faintly. Oh no, just a random thought. Derek arched a brow. Funny. You haven't cared about anything outside your turf for years. And now you're suddenly interested again? As he spoke, I felt a chill run down my spine. How could you say something like that in front of the boss? I asked him later. There's no way Brooks would have said it unless the boss himself wanted him to. Derek winked. I know. That's why I gave him what he wanted. I froze as realization dawned. That gunshot wound, you did it to yourself? He nodded. Yeah. But why go that far? Couldn't you have just faked it? He let out a quiet sigh. If I hadn't, you wouldn't be seeing me right now. I pressed my lips together, a sour ache rising in my chest. Derek's reputation in the underworld was infamous. Even back when I was trapped in that lavish prison of a mansion, I'd heard the terrifying rumors. But now that I'd married him, shared so much with him, I'd started to understand. To rise to the top of this world, you had to play dirty. And someone always had to bear the cost. In this case, that someone was Derek. While others reaped the benefits, he took the blame. Things are stable now, he murmured, gently stroking my hair. It's time I step back. But before I become a leisurely rich man, there's one last thing I need to do for you. The fall of your family, it'll be good, for you, and for me. When I continued to stare at him silently, he softened his voice to coax me. All right, enough of that. Let's not talk about the past or the future. Tonight is a beautiful night. Why don't you have a glass of wine with me, Betty? He was wearing a pale gray silk robe, slightly open at the chest, revealing his sculpted collarbone and a hint of his chest. The warm floor lamp cast a golden glow over his skin, making him look almost too tempting. Even his hand, resting lightly at my waist, with those long, well-defined fingers, it was all a bit too suggestive. I swallowed hard. Then came his low, seductive whisper. Betty, you've been ignoring me for far too long. That broke the last thread of restraint in my mind. I leaned in like a queen intoxicated by beauty and kissed him, mumbling. So tell me, what do I have to do to make it up to you? Derek gave an innocent shrug. I'm still recovering, too weak to resist. I'll have to leave myself in my wife's hands. The floor lamp stayed on all night. That night, everything felt reversed. Like Derek was the one marrying into my world. He let out a quiet breath. Betty, what are you doing now? I smirked. Darling, I remember exactly what you did in the study that night. He surrendered with a helpless sigh. You really hold grudges, don't you? By the time we woke, it was nearly noon. Due to his injuries, the syndicate had already issued an official notice. Derek was to rest at home for 2 months, with no obligation to show up in person. We both knew what that really meant. It was the first move to strip him of power. A warning from the boss. They're nervous, Derek said. After all, most of the key department heads in the organization are people I personally promoted. The boss might still be in charge, but the ones who truly helped us rise are the strong middle-level officers. The ones loyal to me. So the safe, it contains the organization's secrets? After learning even the boss knew about the safe, and remembering what Abby once told me, I finally pieced it all together. Ella was sent by the boss, wasn't she? She got close to me on purpose, visited the villa repeatedly, studied the security schedule. She figured out when the study was least guarded, and snuck in? Abby had gone to prepare breakfast, so it was Derek brushing my hair that morning. He had surprisingly nimble fingers and an excellent eye for aesthetics. He dug through my jewelry box, chose a purple butterfly hairpin with diamond accents, and clipped it into place. It looked stunning. He admired it in the mirror, satisfied, then picked up an eyebrow pencil to fix my brows. Yes, he said calmly as he traced the arches, she hid it well. Even when I was poisoned, it was her who did it. It took a long time to trace it back to her. I stared. I knew it. I kept that bottle of poison with me the entire time. How did it end up in the... But then I caught the look in Derek's eyes. The pain still lingering from his injuries. I stopped mid-sentence. Lowering my voice, I murmured. I never meant to hurt you. Accepting the poison had only been a tactic. A way to appease my stepmother and Amy, for the time being. When I married Derek, I brought almost everything my mom had left me. Everything, except for one thing. A precious antique vase. My mother had treasured it for years, promising to give it to me as a wedding gift. But on my wedding day, my stepmother kept it. One day, I'd take it back. I know you didn't mean it, Derek said gently. If you really wanted to kill me, there are easier ways. Like. He leaned close and whispered something in my ear. My face flushed crimson. I grabbed the brush and swatted him twice. When I tried to hit him again, he caught my wrist and pinned it gently to the vanity. Don't start trouble, babe. Abby's already made lunch. Without daily obligations at the company, Derek had grown noticeably more relaxed. He even started taking me out on shopping sprees. I practically made a full tour of the city's luxury boutiques. That day, I was browsing calligraphy scrolls at an antique shop when I heard a commotion at the door. I looked up. And saw Amy. She was with a man I didn't recognize. Handsome, maybe. But compared to Derek? No contest. That must have been Brooks, the man she was supposedly engaged to. When Amy spotted me, she froze. Then her eyes landed on Derek, who stood close at my side. Her expression instantly twisted into something ugly. 10. Brooks asked, Daisy, this gentleman is. I'm Daisy's sister, Fiona, I said with a pleasant smile. I heard my little sister and the second young master are getting engaged. Congratulations. Derek played along perfectly, grinning as he draped an arm around my waist. Ah, so you're my sister-in-law. I'm Derek, your sister's husband. Amy had always flaunted her elite status to suppress me. Now I'd married into high society under her name, and she'd been reduced to a mute commoner, unable to even defend herself. The thought alone almost made me pity her. Almost. Under the soft, flattering light, Derek reached over to straighten my collar, then handed me the limited edition perfume he'd just bought. Did you find a scroll you liked, honey? He asked tenderly. After paying the bill, he wrapped an arm around me and, in full view of Amy, walked me out of the shop. Back in the car, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Amy. I opened it right in front of Derek, and we read her flustered rage together. You bitch. You lied to me. You said he tortured you every day and didn't even feed you, but clearly he's obsessed with you. What the hell do you mean by that? I turned to Derek and instinctively looked away, guilty. But he tilted my chin up and forced me to meet his eyes. My wife said I abused her every day? I gave an awkward laugh. Maybe, a slight misunderstanding. Before I could finish, Derek let go of my chin and rolled up his sleeve, revealing 2 very visible red marks on his wrist. Then why don't you tell me how I got these? He asked. My ears went hot. And I don't feed you, he continued. I squealed and lunged at him, slapping a hand over his mouth. Stop. Stop. It's the middle of the day. There are other people in the house. Trying to change the subject, I picked my phone back up and continued reading Amy's messages. Most of it was just her usual string of humiliating remarks, nothing new. But when I reached the last line, my face went pale. Derek noticed instantly and snatched the phone from my hand, reading it out loud. Your mom seduced a married man and had no sense of shame. I'm guessing all your seductive tricks came from her too, right? But I'll give her credit, she had good taste. That antique vase she left you? I'm keeping it. Antique vase? Derek asked. I bit my lip. It was part of my mother's dowry to me, something she treasured her whole life. My stepmother refused to let me bring it with me when I got married. Derek took my hand, warm and gentle. Don't worry, Betty. I'll get it back for you. The very next morning, Derek marched into my family's house with me. And with him came dozens of armed bodyguards. In front of both my stepmother and father, he pulled the vase out of the storage room. With his arm around me, he asked warmly. Honey, is this the piece your mother left for you? My father's face darkened. Even if you're the CEO, barging into someone's home like this is crossing a line. Derek replied lazily, then feel free to file a complaint at the Commerce Bureau tomorrow. His complete disregard made my father too stunned to react, he could only glare daggers at me. I ignored him and inspected the vase carefully. Yes, I said. Derek raised his hand slightly. Take it home. My stepmother tried to play the victim. Betty, you may not be my real daughter, but you're still part of this family. Letting Derek barge in like this, isn't that a little much? I gave her a cold smile. How generous of you. But tell me, what is my identity, and what is his? Do you really think I could stop him if I wanted to? She turned to Derek, pretending to scold me. Please don't blame her, Derek. Betty's an illegitimate child, yes, but we spoiled her growing up. When she heard you were proposing to Daisy, she insisted on taking her sister's place to be the CEO's wife. What else could we do? What a masterful piece of fiction. She should be writing online dramas. Derek remained unfazed. His lips even curled into an amused, arrogant smile. Well then, I suppose it was fate that brought me and my wife together. My stepmother's face stiffened. Derek, perhaps you misunderstood what I meant. Oh? Derek's smile vanished, his eyes icy. Are you questioning my judgment? His gaze swept coldly toward Amy. Average face, no talent. If someone like that married me, that would be the real tragedy. Amy's face turned ashen. But she was the one you originally wanted to marry. There was no such thing, Derek cut her off. You'd better stop talking now. If you upset my wife and she stops talking to me, you couldn't afford to fix that. My stepmother then turned to me again, putting on her fake, gentle face. Betty, just live a good life with Derek. Don't end up like your mother, flirting around, being unfaithful. It's shameful. Years of pent-up anger finally exploded. I raised my hand and slapped her, hard. You don't deserve to talk about my mom. Amy rushed over to support her, glaring at me like she wanted to kill me. My father roared and lunged. Only to be restrained by Derek's bodyguards. Outrageous, he yelled. Betty, how dare you hit your stepmother? You, the so-called legitimate wife, I snapped, knew my mother had no choice but to stay. And instead of confronting your cheating husband, you took it out on her. Tell me, who was the real adulterer? That slap had all my strength behind it, my palm still stung. My stepmother's hair was a mess, her expensive jewelry scattered on the floor, her fake kindness shattered. She screamed. You little bitch. You're just like your whore of a mother. I ignored her. Slowly, I stepped up to my father, pulled out a sleek folding knife, and pressed it to his neck. I've wanted to do this for 5 years. But I was afraid you'd die too easily. After all, you're the one who had my mother beaten to death. She deserved it, he roared. She chose this life. She should have known her place. If she cheated, drowning her in a pond would have been too kind. I sneered. Oh really? And you, keeping mistresses left and right, what does that make you? I'm nothing like her, he bellowed. His body tensed, and a thin line of blood appeared on his neck. She lived off me, ate my food, took my money. Without me, she'd have died on the streets. That's not true, I said, shaking my head. If you hadn't forced her into being your mistress, she would have made it just fine on her own. She had talent. She could have supported herself and grown old with someone she truly loved. And in that moment, I really did want to kill him. 11. But Derek stepped forward and gently took my hand, whispering in my ear, just wait a little longer. Betty, don't throw your life away for revenge. I closed my eyes, and finally, I let go. This luxurious villa, with its polished marble floors and rows of expensive plants, had perfectly concealed all traces of what happened 5 years ago. But every time I stood here, I couldn't stop thinking of my mother, her bloody, lifeless body, the trail of blood that soaked the tiles. My fingertips trembled. The next moment, Derek picked me up in his arms and carried me toward the door. Let's go home, Betty. Just as we reached the entrance, hurried footsteps sounded behind us. Derek stopped and turned around. Amy stood there, her face twisted in rage. Her assistant, Kara, was right behind her and said coldly. Like mother, like daughter. Her mom was trash, and instead of being ashamed, she's proud. Aren't you worried she'll turn out just like her? Derek's expression didn't change. If that's the case, then I'll just work harder to make her love me too much to leave. After returning to the villa, the first thing Derek did was take me to see the painting. It was displayed in a grand studio, surrounded by works from famous artists. My mother had been one of the best painters of her time, and this painting had taken her a long time to complete. She had intended it as my dowry. As I moved closer, I suddenly froze. Raising my hand to touch it, I noticed subtle patterns, hidden words painted with a special, invisible pigment that could only be felt, not seen. Betty's cherry blossom tree. Betty's butterfly. Betty and Mom. In that moment, I broke down in tears. That night, Derek held me close and comforted me patiently, his voice low and warm. It used to be Betty and her mom. Now it's Betty and me. But the next morning, men from the organization came and took him away. The man who stepped out of the luxury car had sharp features and a cold smile. He looked eerily similar to Brooks. He was Brooks's older brother. I rushed forward and blocked the vehicle. All Derek did was come home with me and retrieve something my mother left me. How is that trespassing? The man sneered. This is the organization's decision. If you have a problem with it, come to headquarters. I'm sure the brothers would love to settle this. Betty, go back, Derek said softly from the side. Even with a gun pointed at him, his demeanor was calm, not a trace of panic. You didn't sleep well last night. Go home and rest. Once Derek was taken away, I returned to the villa, pale-faced and shaken. I went straight to his study. When someone wants to find an excuse to punish, they never lack for one. If Derek really was hiding some kind of sensitive document from the organization, it had to be in that safe. I forced myself to stay calm and began searching. After a long while, I finally found the hidden compartment. Inside was a locked safe. But when I opened it, all I found was a single pair of plain silver earrings. 3 years ago, just before Amy lost her voice, I'd been gravely ill. Burning with fever, left unattended by order of my stepmother. One night, I struggled to get up for water. Through a haze, I felt someone hold me, and cool liquid with a faint medicinal scent trickled down my throat. The next day, I was significantly better. But the silver earring I'd worn was gone. I thought I must have lost it in my fever dream. Now, holding that safe and staring at the earrings. Kara's voice suddenly came from behind me. Derek never forgot you. He never stopped thinking about you, all these years. What you've been searching for has been within reach all along. Snapping out of my daze, I rushed back to the bedroom. I opened my jewelry box. Sure enough, inside the hidden compartment beneath a stack of cash, I found a tightly folded document. So this was the secret that made the entire syndicate fear Derek. The front of the paper bore only 10 words. If the new leader proves unworthy, he can be replaced. 10 simple words. But their impact was earth-shattering. I forced myself to steady my breathing, carefully returned the document to the compartment, then thought better of it, and decided to hide it on me instead. Can you get me into headquarters? I asked Kara. There's a way, she replied. But, it won't be comfortable. In the end, Kara disguised me and had me blend in with the food delivery crew. That's how I got into the syndicate's headquarters. The temporary holding cells were in the southwest wing of the heavily guarded building. And now that Derek was being detained, security was tighter than ever. Even just walking near that area with my head down drew suspicion, guards tripled, and their eyes followed my every move. With no other option, I returned to the kitchen where I'd entered. An important meeting was happening tonight. As night fell, the building lit up like daylight. I stayed in the back kitchen, racking my brain for a way to rescue Derek. Kara had said she and a few loyal subordinates would infiltrate the headquarters and rendezvous with me. But just then, the kitchen door opened. Someone slipped inside quietly, glancing around. Thanks to a nearby counter and the dim light, he didn't see me. He reached into his coat, pulled out a paper packet, and dumped its contents, powder, into the large water dispenser. Right at that moment, a car passed outside. Its headlights shone through the window, illuminating the man's face. It was Brooks. Amy's fiancé. The one who always seemed so calm and refined. He was here for the meeting. Why was he sneaking into the kitchen to poison the water? I stayed hidden until he left, then disguised myself as a server and followed. The meeting room was filled with raised voices. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Besides the big boss at the head table, most attendees were people I'd seen before. The others had to be senior members from Hunter's faction. My mind spun rapidly as I stepped forward, only to be urged by someone behind me. "What are you standing there for? Serve the drinks." Terrified someone might recognize me, I kept my head low, using the tray and coffee cups to hide my face as I entered. I moved up the aisle, walking in sync with the server ahead of me. We both stopped in front of the big boss. I glanced up, and our eyes met. His gaze was as deep and cold as a winter lake. The smile on his face never reached his eyes. This was no fool. Then, chaos. The server in front of me suddenly flung their tray aside and drew a dagger from their sleeve, lunging straight for the boss. "Watch out!" The secretary screamed as the boss leaned back, barely dodging the first strike. But the attacker raised the knife again. Without thinking, I lunged forward, grabbing her by the waist and dragging her back. As she twisted violently, I reached for my pepper spray and blasted it in her face. With a shriek, she dropped the knife and clutched her eyes. 12. At the exact moment the assassin collapsed to the ground, the sound of shouting and fighting rose from the hallway outside. Uncle Hunter shot to his feet and shouted coldly, "The boss has been deceived. He has no idea how to lead. For the future of the organization, he must step down. It's time someone capable took charge." "Me, excuse me? Are you talking about me?" The three of them stared at me in horror. What they saw was a blood-smeared face, hair in wild disarray, looking more like a vengeful ghost than a woman. "You fight better than most men," the boss said from behind me as he slowly rose to his feet. "Naturally, no one would mistake you for some wicked seductress." Then his sharp eyes turned to Hunter. "Seventh brother, you always said the capable should lead. Were you talking about yourself? You've schemed for years, constantly whispering in my ear that Derek was ambitious and planning to overthrow me. So this was your endgame?" Just as he finished speaking, the meeting room doors swung open. And in walked Derek, holding a blood-stained gun. Behind him were Kara, Gavin, and two of the guards who once worked in my villa. "Uncle Hunter," Derek said calmly, "you plotted for years, only to see it all fall apart today. The moles you planted in the security team have already been dealt with. Are you going to surrender, or must we force you?" All composure drained from Hunter's face the moment he saw me. "Betty?" And in that moment, I understood everything. Derek and the boss had set a trap to lure the snake from its den and wipe out Hunter's faction for good. This was the final, decisive move in consolidating their power. "You saved the boss's life," the big boss said, "name your reward." Still holding the bloodied knife, I turned and knelt. "I want to press charges against two people." "Oh? And who might that be?" "I want to charge Eric for forcing my mother into being his mistress 17 years ago. And I want to charge his wife for drugging my mother's tea, inviting strangers into the house to humiliate her, and for conspiring with Eric to murder her. They killed her and hid the body." A cold wind blew through the meeting room. Each word I spoke was saturated with bitter, burning hatred. A long pause. Then the boss's voice rang out above me. "If this is true, then a life must pay for a life. As for your mother, any woman who raised someone as loyal and brave as you deserves to be honored. She will be posthumously recognized as an honorary advisor to the syndicate." I bowed my head deeply, lips trembling. "Thank you, boss, for your wisdom." But I knew the truth. Eric and his wife had simply backed the wrong side. The boss never planned to spare them. My reward, my mother's title, was just a convenient gesture. But it was enough. My mother's name had been cleared. Her honor restored. The lies and slander against her, finally erased. The guards dragged everyone else out of the room. The boss straightened his collar and said calmly, "I'm sure Derek has some things to discuss with you. I'll return to my office. He'll join me when you're done." The tension in my body finally loosened. I turned to Derek, about to scold him. But instead, tears spilled from my eyes. Derek looked instantly panicked. He rushed to me, holding me close. "Were you scared?" "I really thought I was going to lose you," I choked. "I'm sorry, Betty." He pressed my hand over his chest. "This was the last time. The outcome was uncertain, and I didn't want you anywhere near the danger. If things hadn't gone our way, you were supposed to take your jewelry box and run, far away. Never look back. My nose stung. So that's why he'd placed the classified document and all that cash inside my jewelry box. Derek's warmth momentarily banished the chill from that long, dark night. After holding me for a while, he stood up. You should go home with Abby. I have one last thing to take care of. I grabbed his sleeve. He paused and looked back at me. His voice was soft and soothing. Don't worry. You just saved the boss's life, he won't touch me. And remember what I said before? If I ever get locked up, I'd need you to save me. I tilted my head to look at him and said seriously. If you come home tonight with even one scratch, we're sleeping in separate bedrooms for 6 months. In the corner, Abby and Ford quickly turned their faces away, blushing. Derek's lips curled in amusement. Would you really? I wouldn't want to. But I keep my promises. He laughed, walked back to me, and pressed a kiss to my cheek. Then he leaned in and whispered against my ear. Then I hope you'll check me thoroughly when I get home tonight. That night, Derek and I lay in bed, talking softly. If someone ever writes your story, I teased. They'll probably say all kinds of things. That Derek, the underworld kingpin, had his power slowly stripped away by the boss, his ambitions never fulfilled. Derek smiled, his eyes narrowed. I've walked this path willingly. I'm not concerned with what outsiders say. Back when I was on the streets, I saw how the white and black worlds collide. Power is a battlefield. But now the organization is stable, our businesses are clean. I can finally step down and enjoy the rest of my life, with my wife. I smiled, wrapping my arms around his waist, resting my cheek on his chest. If they write about me, I said, they'll call me the disgraceful daughter. The one who ratted out her father and stepmother to the mob boss. Derek chuckled, tipped my chin up, and kissed me. In that case, Betty, we'll just be a pair of villainous lovers. Not a bad story at all. The next day, the new organizational structure was announced. Derek was officially removed as CEO and appointed as an advisor, a high-paying, honorary position with no real power. That confidential document left by the boss was locked away in a safe, likely never to see the light of day again. I'd once told Derek I wanted to meet our mentor again. But he said the man had vanished after Derek re-entered the business world. Off traveling the globe, far from the chaos. There was a time I thought I wouldn't live past 27. I had even considered burning down our house and dying with them all. But now, I often dreamed of my mother. I dreamed of the day she was beaten to death. Tears in her eyes as she whispered to me. Betty, live well. Live well. And now, I truly was. I hadn't let her down. I had avenged her. When the day comes that I leave this world, I'll meet her again, hand in hand with Derek. The following spring, Derek and I traveled to Northern Europe. We stood beneath a sky filled with northern lights. A breathtaking tapestry of color and rebirth. I turned my head and kissed him in the crisp northern wind. He cupped my face gently, his voice low and hoarse. Betty. His fingers gripped my shoulders as the wind tousled my hair. I smiled and pressed a kiss to his trembling lashes. Don't call me that right now. It makes my heart ache. This story is exclusively produced by the YouTube channel, Love Short Story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe.